at is actually, and one of the central charges that we had for the study is what kind of programming of real estate could be located within the depot itself. So we saw the opportunity to pick up transfer customers as part of it, but I don't think that we have a detailed breakdown of how many will be transfer customers versus using the depot as an origin or destination.
And are you looking at anything to tie the Wabasha Street West Entertainment District to the lower town, where the theaters, the Ordway and the Excel?
Programmatically. I think the idea is what we're trying to do here in this section, as you'll see in the next couple slides, is to benchmark how much demand the transit riders that are even just transferring through the building can create for retail within the building. But certainly I think our charge is to figure out how we can better serve their needs as transit customers, provide them with amenities, but also, as you say, get them out of the building and get them into the local businesses within Lower Town. I think that's our task on a lot of our projects, whether it's Union Depot, or I'm doing the same thing right now for the St. Louis Arch, working there. How do you get the tourists to go out into the city and spend more money? And I think that the programming within the depot and the program, the retail tenancies that are within the depot, are what's going to be able to complement those transit services, make people want to dwell longer within the beautiful station that's going to be restored, as well as to go out into Lower Town, eat at restaurants, go to bars, spend money in the local economy.
Mr. Chairman, we know there's 8,000 residents, so we know that number is going to probably come in and go out. We know that there's workers, so those two numbers are fairly easy. It's the rest of them that...
Right. So what we did in order to understand the impact of going from starting with a phase 1 of 175, a phase 2 in 2014 of roughly just shy of 1 million, and then once other services are added in over the next couple of decades, building up to about 4 million riders a year, we just wanted to get a sense for these transit customers themselves are going to generate a need for transit services. We evaluated about a dozen different multimodal transit stations across North America to assess what kind of retail and civic space they provide for their transit customers, to just try to establish a benchmark for Union Depot in comparison with the space that's available for it. So from the study, and you can see starting from the left, the numbers that are smallest mean that they have the most amount of retail per transit rider. So this is a chart that shows number of annual transit riders per square foot of retail. So starting from the left is those that provide the most, going to the right, those that provide the least with respect to the number of transit customers they have. And the last one, the invisible column for Dallas Union Station, is because they actually have no retail. They have about 4 million riders a year, comparable to where you're looking at getting to with no retail. But from the benchmarking, established a rough basis of about 1,000 annual passengers equates to about a square foot of retail.
I have a question on the Dallas piece. Was that intentional, no retail space, or why did that happen?
Yeah, and we did a number of case studies, and we intentionally picked Dallas Union Station to try to understand it better. When Dallas Union Station was initially set up in the 1970s, there was what they called a railroad retail or railroad restaurant concept that included a hot dog vendor and lots of other things. It failed. And when I guess a couple of decades later, when the next stages of renovating Dallas Union Station were taking on, the owner decided to operate the upstairs as purely 100% event space in partnership with Wolfgang Puck. And it's event space that services a very large hotel that they own adjacent to it. And what they found was that the suburban customers coming in took care of their retail needs on the home trip side of things, And within Dallas Union Station, I think they might have a few vending machines.
They have even, I think they had vending machines, but no actual retail. I mean, they had tried various retail concepts, but again, it's purely private developer driven. It was driven by a developer who was interested in the station only because they could get to develop within the station because they had all the surrounding land to build an 1,100 key hotel and the the Reunion Tower in Dallas. And the developer just wasn't focused on the business operations of the depot as much, because that was not the core focus of their deal there. And they feel as though the DART lines, I think, that bring most of the transit riders into the depot, they have coffee stations outside, sort of in the suburban stations, so they feel like the coffee shop can't even survive downtown, because by the time people get to downtown, they've had their coffee on their train, or they're already just walking to get to their job. It's really a pass-through.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Then in terms of civic space and looking at the set of stations, approximately 310 riders is what across the board generates the need for a square foot of civic space. And some of the older facilities that are in the Northeast provide less civic space than that. But we thought that served as just a useful benchmark for estimating how Yes?
What do you mean by civic space?
Civic space is basically passenger circulation space and other space that's not programmed necessarily for retail.
Common area.
So it's common area that, providing you with elbow room when you're in a transit facility.
Right. It's the waiting room, the concourse, the Great Hall is what we count as the civic space here.
So taking those 2 points together, what we did was compared the map that Commissioner Reinhardt mentioned. The colors aren't quite right on, but on those maps, the central areas of the head house, concourse, and waiting room that are in green are what we're looking at in terms of being the main floor civic spaces, and then the perimeter area, the head house in particular, the tenant area is about 16,000 square feet of space. We compared, if you apply those benchmarks to Union Depot at the various points within its life, how much space for sort of civic space, elbow room, and how much space for transit-generated retail would we be likely to induce? And what we found there was that the transit riders would potentially create demand for about 4,000 square feet of retail, which is only about a quarter of the potential retail space within the terminal.
The existing retail space.
The existing retail space within the terminal. And that they would also need elbow room that amounts to about 12,500 square feet of space, which is about a third of the civic space and common area that are in the head house, concourse, and waiting room within Union Depot. So for us, that means that there's both a challenge that the riders themselves are not going to fill up this whole building, but the opportunity for what more can the county do to leverage this asset that you're investing a tremendous amount of money in, and that's going to be a historic gem that really is likely to be unparalleled within the Twin Cities and will be at the top of the list for the great train stations of America as it once was. So what is it that you could do? And that's where we started to look at case studies of what have others done. We looked at a number of case studies and really focused in on three. Yes?
Can I just ask a question? And this doesn't need a long-winded discussion on it. And some places you use 2040, some places you use 2030, some places you use 2034. Is there a reason?
I think the reason for it is that the 2034 was a ridership estimate that was put together for Ramsey County's, the Rail Authority's Tiger Grant application.
Okay.
So we didn't do our own.
It's just, there was just different things.
Ridership,
so it
right.
was like, getting the genesis of
Right.
why some things, because you started out at 2040
Right.
and then narrowed it to 30, and now we're back up to 34. It's intriguing,
Right.
but that's why.
Right.
What
Yes.
it is. Thank you.
So we focused in on 3 case studies. One was Dallas Union Station. The other other transit facility that we thought was a great exemplar for the Twin Cities to look to, and for Ramsey County to look to, was the San Francisco Ferry Building. And then we also included a case study of a historic adaptive reuse that was more local, in consultation with conversation with people in the local community, which was the Midtown Global Marketplace. So we mentioned and got into Dallas Union Station. I think the key point here that I'd say to take away is that the area that's at the top end of this graph, which shows the land of the Reunion District, which is separated by the rail lines from Dallas Union Station. This was a single redevelopment play, and for the initial private developer who what they wanted was the Reunion District, Union Station was a tail for them. The dog was the Reunion District, and they acted like that. They tried out one concept in the 1970s with a railroad restaurant concept before there was much in the way of train service there. It failed within a year and basically sat dormant for about 20-25 years until, I think the story goes that the developer's daughter wanted to get married in Union Station. So he did a deal with Wolfgang Puck and turned Union Station into this great banquet hall that is largely a private space for events. And it really functions in an integrated way with the hotel in the Reunion District. So the model was driven by private development, and it led to minimal public benefits in the station itself. Closer to home, the Midtown Global Market in South Minneapolis was an adaptive reuse. This was the Sears,
The former Sears Roebuck headquarters.
So one of the largest buildings in the region, and the concept was really driven by the local community as a business incubator first and foremost. It initially started out with some optimistic forecasts that led to some unexpected requests for public funds, and there wasn't really a pragmatic revenue forecast. The market was developed starting, I think, in 2003. It initially opened in 2006, went through a number of changes in 2007. But what works here, and it still is a work in progress and in its early phases, what works at Midtown Global Market is programming that helps to drive retail success. They have programs virtually every day of the year, and certainly every weekend. And in here, like our experience in other public markets or marketplace environments, leadership, and often in the form of a single motivated individual, but leadership is really key to marketplace success, because you need to go out and identify and cultivate vendors, bring them together, knit together programming that makes this whole concept work. Yes?
On that leadership piece, did that come from the development community? Did that come from the city's economic development area? Did that come from the county? Where did that come from?
So the Neighborhood Development Center was in charge of running the Midtown Global Market, and they are great at running a business incubator. A public market development is more of a retail development than purely a business incubator, although it does incubate businesses. So their revenue and their merchandising strategy was not meeting their projections. They brought in John Wheeler, the general manager of the Mall of America, and he came in to revamp the merchandising strategy. I think that's a case where you have a business incubator that also wanted to be a successful retail marketplace, and they needed to bring in an experienced retail leader, someone who knew how to tenant the spaces, someone who knew how to do the merchandising strategy for which tenants will work within the building, and what juxtaposition of tenants will work. What should their revenue stream look like, so that they readjusted their model.
Right. They also organized the space, so I think approximately half the tenant space is currently in use by vendors, but through programming and art and the like, they fill the space out. So it's a strategy that we think could be very effective at Union Depot, just given the amount of space that's in it and the timeline that it's going to take for the ridership to take up, that you have a great monumental space that can be programmed very flexibly, which might be with part-time or temporary programming, but can help to fill the space up, and it's something that we think is a good strategy to keep in mind.
And so that came from the Community Development Corporation, and that's connected with that area then?
I believe so. I don't know if there were conversations between Hennepin County and Neighborhood Development Center, since I know that there were public funds going in to support, to subsidize the operations of the building, but perhaps Commissioner...
You know, I have a sense that it was the city, because every time I've been there, Mayor Ryback has been there, and it's like he's championing this place.
Right.
So I think the city has really had a lot to do with the programming and so on.
Janice?
Just, but on this, before you go off it, however, the additional request for public funds, actually, because the revenue really wasn't sustaining the property.
Right.